Welcome to another episode of Resourceful Women in Mining. Today, I'm very happy to talk with Madison. We have been arranging this for weeks and weeks in airports and convention halls and trade show floors. So, Madison, I'm glad that we were able to connect and make it work. I'll let you introduce yourself and we'll talk about what it's been like in mining for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Linnell. And yeah, excited that we could finally make this happen. I think our story is a very Northwest Territories story where we ran into each other, as you said, at airports and conferences and all over the place, and just always a small world in the mining community in the North.
Especially so, yes.
Yeah. My name is Madison Jerhoff, and I'm currently the manager of permitting and environment with Lift Power. Lift Power is a hard rock lithium exploration company in Canada with their flagship project in the Northwest Territories. I have had a bit of a windy road with my career, which I really enjoyed, so certainly not a negative thing from my perspective. I started off, my degree is in environmental science with a concentration in biology, and then I have a second degree in anthropology. So I am a designated professional biologist in Alberta and BC.
Excellent.
Yeah, and so
I didn't know that about you, that you were a double degree. Yeah.
and anthropology was one that I ended up doing for fun because I enjoyed the courses so much, and I
Mhm.
really enjoyed school, so I didn't mind adding on a little bit of extra time to my degree. And it actually ended up being what got me in the field the fastest as an environmental consultant, which I always like to tell that story because
Yeah, it's
you never
phenomenal.
know. Yeah, you never know what might end up coming in handy. And because that was an anthropology degree, I did take some archaeology courses, and I did an archaeology study abroad in Mexico. And my first ever field trip, even though I was, on the team as an aquatic biologist, was actually as an archaeology field assistant. So,
Do you
yeah,
still have a little brush?
I don't still have one.
Oh
No,
man.
I know. I've had to move too many times with all my field gear. So I've really had to try and minimize how much gear I carry around with me as I move, especially as I do less field work now. So
Well, we all have our priorities.
yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Um, but yeah, so I started off out of university. I actually did go to South Korea and I taught English there for 2 years. So that was just a really good life experience, and came back from that and joined an environmental consulting firm, as many biologists and environmental professionals do. And at that firm, I had a lot of opportunities to try everything and anything, which I really enjoyed. So I just put my hand up for everything and really took advantage of the opportunities the consulting firm had. So I did do field work in almost every discipline that one is able to, including all sorts of water disciplines, fish, vegetation, soils, wildlife, wetlands, traditional knowledge studies, and birding. So that was a really great experience for me and
Awesome.
really helped me get to where I am in my career now, because I do understand, at least at a basic level, most disciplines, as well as a lot of the difficulties that come with working in the field.
I would imagine that your understanding of beyond biology would be very beneficial as well. Like when you said that you had the traditional knowledge study, to me, that's one of the more unique intersections of the studies that you've done and the work that you've gotten to do. Is there a site that you remember for being particularly interesting? And it doesn't have to be limited to the traditional knowledge study, but I don't know, for most people I talk to, they have a favorite site story, like or a discovery or
Yeah.
something that happened that every site teaches us something. So I was wondering if you had one of those to share as well.
Yeah, definitely. I remember I worked on a linear project in southern Alberta in and around Medicine Hat. And so, in my head, there's nothing there. It's prairie. And, what are we going to look at in terms of, um, all the different biology disciplines for that particular project? I worked on a lot of different things, including vegetation and wildlife, which were two that I was like, what vegetation and what wetlands? We're in the prairies, and I was shocked by how much was there. And once we had to do seasonal trips. So once I had walked that linear path for 5 trips and saw completely different vegetation every single trip and different wildlife, and went on and participated in traditional knowledge studies with different communities, and just hearing their stories around how they use the land and the different plants. It was amazing to me, because I just always in my head pictured it as this very barren landscape, that and that was certainly not the case.
Yeah, almost like one type of grass that blows
Yeah,
and maybe some
exactly.
gophers.
Exactly. But there was, I was a second, so it wasn't my discipline of expertise. But when I was out with a vegetation specialist, there was 40 different types, and trying to identify all the different types and all the flowering plants as well. They flower for such a short period of time that's
Mhm.
why I think we oftentimes don't associate the prairies with flowers, but there was so many that were just
Yeah,
gorgeous.
it's
Oh
so
no.
it's so interesting to be on the prairie when there's so much change so quickly. And it's just something, if you
Mhm.
if you grew up there, you're used to it. But if it's new, it's new, and it's sort of it's a revelation for people. So it's interesting to hear that that was one of your kind of holy cow site
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, when you go to northern BC and stuff, at least for me, it's expected, right? That biodiversity is expected, but it wasn't necessarily for the prairies. So that was
Mhm.
certainly one of my favorite times and projects that I got to work on.
Well, that's excellent. And a lovely shout out to the Flatlands as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They need all the support,
I was gonna
for
say, yeah, any love that you can throw at the prairies is always appreciated.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so while I was in consulting, I did work primarily in Alberta, northern BC, and then the Northwest Territories. I ended up leaving consulting, or that specific consulting company, to go work for another company to do construction monitoring. That was a piece of the project lifecycle that I felt that I was missing. The company I was with previously did mostly baseline work, so that's in
Mhm.
anticipation of a project going through environmental assessment, and then operations monitoring. So I was really interested in getting that construction piece.
It's definitely
And
relevant in the resource industry because, it's such an important part of the cycle. And to
yeah,
get it right
certainly.
is, if things go wrong in the construction phase, maybe it doesn't get built.
Yeah,
So it's just as critical as all of the others. It's not a green light, nothing is for certain. And as with everything, doing a quality job of the project matters at every stage. So, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting to see, you put all this effort into the baseline studies, into, when you're working in Alberta on linear projects, into alignment sheets that outline the different mitigation measures from an environment perspective that have to be followed in construction. It's really interesting to then see how those are used on a construction site, right? And it really helps, I think, understand how to make those potentially a bit easier to follow, easier to read, and how all those mitigation measures really do have those on the ground implications.
Yeah, it is kind of the boss of the day, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I did that for a little bit, and then I moved to a caddy. So that was my first experience working directly, on the what we call client side or proponent side in the consulting world, but working for the actual company that was doing the mining. And so
Mhm.
I was with a caddy for I think about 2.5 years as their fisheries and aquatics advisor, and went back to consulting for a little bit. And then I landed at Lyft. And Lyft is another story of giving me insight into another phase of the project. So now I'm working in exploration and getting close to having all the project phases. I'm going to be missing the reclamation piece once I'm finished with Lyft, but
You're gonna have to make a
I'll
punch
be
card for
getting there.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Bingo cards. Do you have any I can get? So yeah, I've been really grateful to have the holistic experience. I think both from the wide range of disciplines as well as from the different stages of projects, as well as both on the consulting side and the proponent side, I think has really helped me progress in my career.
Yeah, I do. I like that idea of being able to see things from different perspectives and actually getting to spend some time there. Is there any kind of connection or particular insight that you gained from flipping to the owner side, back to the consulting side, back to an owner side? Like what are some of the gains there that you're aware of already? And I'm going to guess that there are gains that you're not even aware of. Like I think probably your understanding has just developed in a way that is natural, but I'm guessing there's something that you've paid particular attention to that's kind of changed the way you look at projects.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the approach to things is probably the biggest thing I've noticed and been cognizant of. Because when one's a consultant, especially when one's on the technical side of being a consultant, the focus really is on one's technical discipline, right? And
Mhm.
that's what someone's role is. So it's not a bad thing, but it is a very narrow focus. And so even stepping away from that into more of a project management role really gets into how does this fit into the bigger picture, and how do we need to collaborate and work with other disciplines to make this a possibility, and do all that integration.
Mhm.
And then, you know, just the way that something's approached in terms of once I was on the corporate side, everything is about risk management, identification, and implications for the company, right? So if we find certain data or you know, come across a certain situation in the field, the lens then becomes how does this impact the company, and in my role, how do I mitigate any potential risks, or you know, communicate this internally or externally, and all those types of things. So the approach and the main drivers I find are quite different, but having both sides I think really allows someone to be, you know, more productive on the consultant end, but also more productive on the proponent end. And I think it allows a certain aspect of understanding as well of where the person on the other side is coming from.
Mhm. I would, of course, always approach something from a communication slash science perspective, and I think it makes you fluent in
Hmm.
in consultant and fluent in corporate as well. And I think that that's probably something that many people could aspire to. I know there's an argument for, picking something, staying the course, and, just diving deeper and deeper and deeper more technically. And for people who are all about the technical aspect of it, as you pointed out, it's it's really great. And I think there's a lot of potential for people to, have really fulfilling careers and do amazing things if they want to go there. And I find often someone who is more general gets a kind of it's like, oh, okay, well, you know what you're doing, but maybe not. And I think that we overlook that skill of being able to have so many perspectives on what a project is, how it operates, what the implications are. And, for anyone listening to what a career can be like, there's there's a real niche for a generalist, which sounds a little bit funny, but I think you're a great example of that because your competence is so high in so many things. And it's just fantastic to be able to, just reach into your bag and have that skill and look at something and be able to have, multiple perspectives on it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Linnell, from my perspective as well. Because yeah, certainly, I think being a generalist can be looked at in a bit of a negative light, or at the very least, not quite understanding the, to your point, the depth and the competency that's brought to the table, because it is a bit, it's harder to wrap one's hands around, so to speak, because it's all general. So it's hard, you
Yeah.
know, what's the competency when one's a generalist, but that is the competency, is that one can, to your point, reach into their bag and have a plethora of information and knowledge and experience to pull from. So I think that that's a really great point. And I also think, to your point, those people that are highly technical and just continue to dive down have huge value. And like, I wouldn't be able to do my job without those people. And I think, you know, we're all different for a reason. And I could never be someone that gets that focused and specific, because I would get too bored.
Yeah.
Um, but there's lots of people who would get too stressed with having to jump around to things as much as I need to. So it's just different skills and different
Yeah.
joys that
Yeah.
bring to people's lives. And both so crucial in the overall, mining community and life cycle.
Yeah, and when you say, what you're talking about is why we need teams, because projects need those people who are singularly focused and deeply expert in that particular thing. But also that can kind of trap the knowledge and what they have. And so having someone who is able to work with that and between the company or and between the consultant or and with a client and be able to bridge that and show the relevance of it as well, I think is incredibly valuable. So
Yeah,
uh, if
agreed.
if we can switch gears just a tiny bit, um, one of the purposes of this podcast is to get stories out and say, as a woman, what have you seen? What have you noticed? What resonates for you when you're moving through the world in the resource industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a
Just a
great
tiny
question.
question.
Yeah, just a small one. I was going to say, I think I need to be introspective on that for a bit before I can probably answer in a nice, articulate way. But my gut thought on that is things are improving. Across the board, there's more women who are working in this industry, and that just helps, and more presence helps increase the feeling of a community around that, and people getting used to having women around. So there's a bit of the less of the shock and awe when we are around.
You're a girl
Um,
scientist.
yeah, exactly. What do you mean? I mean, my favorite thing's always when I'm in the room, the assumption is that I'm there to take notes or I'm not there in the technical capacity because I'm the only woman in the room. And I think that will probably take some time to come around. But there are a lot of great people in the industry who don't come follow that approach. And the more that of those people are around, the less and less we'll see that. And I think it's already starting. So,
Yeah.
I do encourage women as they're comfortable to definitely, take a swing at it and not get too discouraged by that. And the only way we increase having more women in industries if more women start joining. And it is a really great place to work. Like I have had a ton of fun, and I haven't had, I've had way more positive experiences than I've had negative. And certainly sometimes those things get me down a little bit more than others when, someone assumes I'm a note taker when I'm there to actually lead the meeting. But I'm sure there's men that deal with that to a certain extent as well, right? So I definitely, yeah, I've had way more positive experiences than I've had negative, and just everything that uh, the mining industry has allowed me to see, even just in terms of like super remote places in Canada that nobody else would see, and doing really awesome work with really great people and expanding my horizons and my perspectives. I mean, now that Indigenous integration is so crucial, it's quite different
Hmm.
from when I started my career, and I find I learned so much more now and have that other additional perspective when I'm doing work that I just really, really appreciate and never take for granted. So there's lots of really great positives that I think outweigh some of the, trickier things around being our gender in this industry.
Hmm. It is very interesting, and as we record this, we're on the cusp of another PDAC convention in Toronto, and
Hmm.
it's probably still about, I would say, 15 to 20 men per women. I think that would be a fair
Yeah,
ratio,
I think
approximately.
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to talk about and think about is what would what would need to change to make it even? I mean, companies would need to hire it, all those kinds of things, but what would companies have to do to make, what would it look like if we get that amazing, 50-50?
Yeah. I don't know. I like to think about it as like, what can we all do?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I really do think it's a society thing that we can all do. And to me, I think a big thing is allowing space for women to show up authentically. So when I first started my career, I was so nervous of showing up to site and being too feminine, right? Because I was already the first girl or the only girl likely that was
Hmm.
going to be at site. I didn't want to show up and having people question my competency because I had, I don't know, but pink boots or whatever the case
Right?
was that I wanted to have.
Yeah, or a
And I
scrunchie.
remember exactly, exactly a scrunchie. And I remember one of the field personnel I worked with said, Madison, why do you care? Like, just show up. Like, if you want your, I like to have long nails. If you want to have your long nails, just show up and have them. And I lived in this world for so long where I felt like I had to show up a certain way to
Hmm.
make to like not to represent women in a good way and to not show up too feminine because I was in this male dominated industry. And now I'm just so, I really embrace the fact that I can be both. I can be in a male dominated industry and go into the field for 12 hours a day with a huge smile on my face, and I can do all that while I have my long nails and my blonde hair and my bubbly personality. And I think showing up that
Yeah.
way also shows the next generation that they can do that, right? I went
Hmm.
to Roundup and I went to a mentorship session on the Sunday, and it was a travel day for me. And I wore space buns and I wore some crazy glasses.
Yeah.
And I did it somewhat intentionally because I left and I was like, I don't know if this is the best look for Roundup, but I did it intentionally because I wanted the younger generation to see
Hmm.
that this is okay and showing up this way is okay. I still looked professional. My hair was still done. Um, everything about my look was professional, but it was very much feminine and not kind of the norm. And I had multiple women come up to me after and say that they just appreciated how I showed up. They loved my outfit. It made them feel like, oh, maybe this is a space that I could be, because that would be a way that I would see myself showing up.
Hmm.
So I think that provides a space to allow others to see themselves in the industry. And if we try and make ourselves fit this kind of, more masculine box or societal box, whatever the case
Yeah.
may be, we're discouraged. We're not allowing others to see themselves in us. And I think that's really what's going to make that 50-50 become more prevalent. And so to your kind of initial question, and my very long-winded answer is
I love your answer.
when companies allow women to show up that way, I think that also encourages it. My boss and I joke around all the time because I'm my style is very dopamine, we'll say. So it's always very colorful. And when we met the US ambassador, I was like, I don't have a plain suit jacket. Every suit jacket I have is like floral or bedazzled and she's like, wear your suit jacket, Madison. Like that's no problem. And that's how I showed up. And so having, working with people as well who support you showing up as your authentic self, in a professional way, I think is great. And
Hmm.
again, I think just opens the door to allowing other people to see that and feel comfortable and feel like they can show up to work as their authentic selves.
I'm so relating to what you're saying because as I move through in any kind of professional capacity, I have this strong desire to be taken seriously.
Hmm.
And there's something that we've been taught. I think I'm probably a generation uh, further than you are. But I think there's something that we've taught that we've been taught or that we've absorbed in society that says, you know, seriousness is masculine.
Hmm.
And I love everything about your answer because seriousness is not masculine.
Hmm.
There is so I'm a very, very serious woman. And I like a lot of the things that you mentioned. I
Yeah.
like color, but I always when I go to a conference, I kind of, I'll have like one or two little things that are, my small assertions that, yeah, this is, it's professional, but I'll wear something that's a little bit unusual, or I'll wear,
Hmm.
I'll do something bigger because I'm like, I don't, I want to fit, but I don't want to conform. And there was a really interesting study that I came across when I was talking to a university student, And she was looking into it and said that what you wear actually has an impact on the way that you feel about the task that you're approaching. So she pulled
Interesting.
together a whole bunch of studies, and they were sort of, double-blind studies. They were really cleverly crafted, well-controlled studies on psychology, and it was like when they were told that the very same jacket, when they were told it was a painter's coat, they didn't perform as well on math tests as the group that was told that those were doctor coats.
Wow.
So I love that we're broadening what a serious professional can look like, can wear, and quite literally, as you said, how you show up at work. So
Yeah.
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 And
I think that's a great point.
that makes this podcast really fun because I never know what awesome thing guests are going to come up with. And it's so interesting to be able to get that story and as you say, like literally how you show up. And
Yeah.
the thing that we can be many things at once. That we contain multitudes and that we can bring those multitudes to work with us and
Yeah,
be
exactly.
taken seriously. And I like that it's something that you prioritized.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not always a walk in the park because I think I
No.
definitely get some judgments based on how I show up, but at this point I would rather just show up as me and deal with those judgments than not and potentially be taken more seriously because to your point I conform, right? So I
Mhm.
think we all just have to continue to show up that way and pave the way for others to feel like they have space to
And
join
if we,
us in mining because mining's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And if we flip the script on that a little bit too, what do you learn from those people who do judge how you show up? And when people do that, I think it's wonderful to challenge people's ideas of what a professional woman is, does, looks like, and all of those things, because for someone to make that judgment says so much about the judger and a lot less about the person that they're judging. So I,
Yeah.
I think it's a great challenge. And, I think it's probably great for everyone who works with you to get to know you and, kind of internalize, oh, yes, space buns and serious scientist,
Yes.
highly technical person, highly capable human that I'm, conversing with right here. And and I would imagine that you've probably challenged and changed a lot more minds than you realize.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very good point, Linnell. And I think combo that with my age and to your point, how I show up just even in terms of my personality. And I think it probably has challenged a lot of people's conceptions on that.
And I think that's I'm getting the notice from the timer here that we're almost out of time, and I really would love to give you the last word on the industry, where you see it going, and maybe even just to say, sum up what the industry would look like when people are more authentic.
Yeah, great question. Uh, I think the industry is going great places. I think in general, as a society, we are becoming so much more, socially and environmentally and economically responsible. And I think all those are just going to push the mining industry even further and to be even better at accomplishing all those. And I really see the passion with those I work in the mining industry to make meaningful change in all those areas. And I think us showing up authentically will only allow that to continue, so we offer a woman's perspective and point of view. I offer more of the environment point of view compared to a geologist. We're integrating indigenous knowledge now so much more thoroughly. I think everybody who brings a perspective and feels safe in the space to authentically share that is only going to make the industry as a whole better. And I'm really excited to see where we go with that.
I think you are very astute in your observations of it, and I love the optimism. And as I was listening throughout, you have an optimism, but you've got a thread of realism working through it as well to say, it's not all, I use the phrase sunshine and rainbows. Um, but the work that's getting done on it when the times are a little bit difficult, um, I like the part that you take for yourself and that you're, you know, we can say an internal locus of control. The world as it is as it is. And, what I can control is how I present myself in it, how I operate, how I walk through the world. And I think that's a fantastic message. And I couldn't be happier to have had a chat with you today.
Well, thank you so much, Linnell, and it was lovely having a chat with you. And thank you so much for doing this podcast in general. I think this, as with everything else that we've talked about today for how to change, getting more women into industry, I think this is a great way to do that. And thank you so much for sharing people's stories and providing a platform for that.
Well, I enjoy all the conversations and thanks for that. And we will talk again soon and we'll probably bump into each other at PDAC as well. So,
Great. Thanks so
thank
much, Linnell. Have a great evening.
you too. Thank you. And as always, if listeners are enjoying the stories and you want to ensure that you get more stories, please like, subscribe, and share the stories out. And we will have increasing waves of conversation about what it's like to be in the mining industry and how that industry might look in a future that has even more women bringing all of the awesomeness that they can. Resourceful Women is a product of the Prospector News. Opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker and speaker alone. Resourceful Women is for educational and entertainment purposes, and nothing in the podcast should be taken as investment advice. Always consult with a licensed personal financial advisor before making any investment purchases.